With Cowboy Wisdom Podcast. Today's podcast is 7 ways why the world is trapped in tradition museums. Because we follow traditions that are ancient, but we've never modernized them to fit to expand the world. The world is trapped because people lack imagination. The world is trapped because people keep worshiping traditions that were built for a reality long time ago. Tradition becomes a museum the moment it stops evolving and starts demanding loyalty. Most people never realize they're living inside rituals, rules, and roles that were designed for survival, hierarchy, and conformity, never for awareness, sovereignty, or innovation. They cling to the past because it feels safe, not because it's veracity in now. This is how the global museum mind forms. People defend inherited customs, repeat outdated behaviors, and call it culture, when really it's fear disguised as heritage. The world stays trapped because it keeps choosing the comfort of repetition over liberation of perception, unleashing their perceptor prowess. The frontier opens only when someone stops bowing to tradition and starts breathing from their own unborrowed awareness. And that's something I've really expanded into. I experience unborrowed awareness because everything you think and know is borrowed. Why the world is trapped in the museum of egotistical arrogance and know-it-all ignorance museum. The world isn't trapped because people are powerless. The world is trapped because people keep worshiping their own certainty like a sacred relic. Egotistical arrogance and know-it-all ignorance have turned humanity into a museum of frozen minds and binded in to where they were yesterday. Everyone polishing their opinions, defending their conclusions, guarding their mental exhibits as if they were eternal truth. Most people never see reality. They see their interpretation of reality. They cling to it with a desperate devotion. And that's the thing. If you look at the world, we're hanging on to yesterday with desperate devotion. That's what I feel. This is how the museum mind seals shut. Certainty becomes a cage, identity becomes a relic, and awareness gets buried under layers of self-importance. The world stays trapped because it keeps choosing the comfort of I already know over the liberation of I'm willing to see and witness fresh experiences. Freedom begins the moment someone stops curating their ego and starts breathing from unborrowed perception. I like that word, unborrowed. That makes it a sovereign. While indoctrinated education is trapped inside the ancestor programming museum. Because indoctrinated education recycles ancestral survival beliefs as knowledge. Indoctrinated systems that don't teach perception, they teach inheritance. They pass down ancestor fears, outdated hierarchies, and obedience-based thinking and social obedience, as if they were universal truths. And the thing about truth is it's anchored in yesterday's mindsets, which is from the museum of yesterday. Students are never learning, they're reenacting the nervous systems of people who lived centuries long ago. And that's all education is, nervous systems of people who lived yesterday. Because indoctrinated education worships tradition instead of awareness. The curriculum is a shrine to the past. Memorize facts, rigid frameworks, and unquestioned authority. It rewards repetition, never realization. This traps learners in a museum where the exhibits never change and the mind never evolves. And that's a good question. How has today's mind never evolved out of yesterday? That's what I witnessed, because if you look at the outside world, we're trying to evolve through yesterday's indoctrinated limitations. Because indoctrinated education trains identity, never wisdom. It builds character, the obedient student shaped by ancestral expectations. This identity becomes a relic, a role, and a cage. When identity is inherited instead of discovered, the mind stays trapped in the museum of ancestor programming. How's the world today unknowingly trapped in ancestor programming? Once I've risen out of it and I can witness it, I witness it in the daily life. Why comfort zone programming is trapped inside the mind-invented museum and inherited nervous system museum. Because the comfort zone is a mental artifact, never a living veracity. The comfort zone is never safety. It's a display case of old reactions, old fears, and old interpretation. Your mind keeps polishing because it's a museum exhibit pretending to be protection, but it's really rejection of your own talents. Once you see it's mind-made, its authority dissolves. Because the comfort zone repeats the past, never sensing the present moment. Comfort zone programming is built from yesterday's conclusion, never today's awareness. I witness that myself when I watch my daily life. And people are telling me this, and then I watch. It's all outdated BS. It forces you to reenact outdated emotional scripts, trapping you in a loop of familiar limitations. The museum mind loves repetition. The warrior loves the nowality of natural nirvana. Because the comfort zone protects identity, dissolving possibility. The mind defends who you were, never who you're becoming or who you desire to be. It keeps you inside a curated identity exhibit, predictable, safe, and small. When you step beyond that identity, the museum cracks and your frontier self rises. Why PhD education is trapped inside mind-invented museums and inherited museums. Because PhD education worships conclusion instead of consciousness. The PhD path trains people to defend theories, never dissolve illusions. It rewards polished arguments, never perceptual clarity. That turns the mind into a museum curator. Preserving old frameworks instead of sensing nowalities. Because PhD education repeats intellectual ancestry instead of awakening original insight to light your light of life to take flight. Most assertions are expansions of someone else's past thinking. It's academic genealogy, never awareness. Students inherit mental relics, polish them, and call it innovation, but it's still the museum of yesterday's mind controlling today. Because PhD identity becomes a relic the moment it replaces perception. PhD identity becomes a relic the moment it replaces perception. The title becomes a glass case. I know, I'm the expert, I'm the authority. This identity traps the person inside a role instead of into the natural nowality of today. When identity outranks awareness, the mind becomes a museum exhibit, static, defended, and outdated. How is everything today outdated if you look at it? And how's the world still moving through yesterday and never gets to today, because the mind never gets to present moment. Why thinking, knowing, learning, knowledge, and thoughts are trapped in inherited nervous system and mind invented museums. Because your thoughts are echoes of your ancestors, never expression of your awareness. Your nervous system carries centuries of survival codes, emotional reflexes, and inherited interpretations. Thinking never arises to the present. It arises from ancestral archives. This makes thought a museum exhibit, old polished familiarity and completely disconnected from the frontier of now. Because knowing is just inherited certainty. Pretending to be the truth. What people call knowledge is usually memorized tradition, cultural programming, and nervous system conditioning. It's never wisdom. It's rehearsed identity of yesterday. Knowing becomes a relic when it stops evolving and starts defending itself. Trapping the mind in a museum of outdated conclusions. Because learning reinforces a museum instead of liberating perception and setting free your perceptor prowess. Most learning is repetition, never realization. It strengthens the neural pathways built by ancestors, teachers, and institutions, never the pathways built by your awareness. This is why thoughts feel old. They are old. The warrior rises the moment he stops referencing inherited programming and starts sensing from unborrowed perception. I love that word, unborrowed. I want all my wisdom, insight, clarity is unborrowed. Why hate, anger, trauma, drama, criticism, backstabbing keep you trapped in inherited nervous system museums and mind-invented museums, because these reactions are ancestral survival codes, never present moment authenticity. Hate and anger and drama aren't born in the moment. They're echoes of ancient nervous system alarms passed down through generation to generation. Mine was, and I still got a lot of it, but I'll loan it to you. Your body fires off yesterday's danger signals even when today is safe. The museum mind keeps replaying these relics as if they're still relevant. Because the mind recycles emotional relics to protect old identity structures, criticism, backstabbing are never expressions of power. They're defensive habits inherited from wounded ancestors who survived through judgment and separation. I had a bad go around with them too, criticism and backstabbing, till I learned the only one I was backstabbing was me. The mind uses these relics to maintain a familiar identity, even if that identity is small, reactive, or painful. It's a museum curator polishing old wounds, because trauma loops are memorized patterns, never conscious choices. Drama and emotional chaos persist because the nervous system learned them long before you had awareness. Drama, trauma, and chaos are comfort zones to an old system. They run like pre-recorded exhibits, predictable, automatic, and outdated. The warrior breaks the loops by sensing from awareness instead of reacting from inheritance. And I did react from inheritance because I had to finally wake up and admit I did exactly like my mom and dad. I did. And once I opened up to admit to it, I liberated me from it. Is there still there? Yeah, but it's every day. But now I know how to rise out of it. Why hard-headedness and stubbornness are trapped in inherited nervous system and mind-invented museums. This is funny to me because stubbornness, I was a professional at being stubborn. And once I realized this, it's every day is expanding out of it. Because stubbornness is an ancient survival reflex your nervous system still thinks it needs. Your ancestors survived by looking into the decisions when danger was near. The rigidity got encoded into your biology as a productive instinct. Today it shows up as hard-headedness, not because you're difficult, but because your nervous system is replaying an old alarm pattern that no longer fits in anybody's life. Because the mind defends familiar beliefs like a museum artifacts. They're really artifallacies. Stubbornness is the mind clinging to what it already knows, even when it's outdated. It polishes old interpretation, protects old conclusions, and guards old identities as if they're priceless relics. Man, I got a lot of them priceless relics that I've let go of. Hard-headedness is just the museum mind refusing to update the exhibit. That's what all the past is a hard-headedness refusing to update the exhibit. Because inherited and emotional patterns feel like identity, never inheritance. You never experience stubbornness as programming. You experience it as me. But it's not you. It's ancestral momentum running through your nervous system and wearing your face. The warrior sees the pattern, never the persona, and steps out of the museum entirely. Why my parents' way of life trapped me inside inherited nervous system and mind-invented museums. Because your nervous system copies their survival patterns before you speak, before language, and before memory, before identity. Your body absorbs their fear responses, emotional reflexes, and coping strategies. You inherit their alarms, never their wisdom. This turns your nervous system into a living museum of the unresolved past, replaying their reactions as if they were your own. Because their worldview becomes your default lens long before you develop awareness. Parents don't just teach by behaviors, they transmit interpretations through their behaviors. Their beliefs about safety, success, love, conflict, and worth become mental architecture you mistake as truth. This is how the mind-invented museum forms. You walk through life seeing through their frames instead of your own perceptions. Because their identity expectations shapes the role you think you must play. Parents hand you a character, and the good child, the strong one, the quiet one, the fixer, the achiever. These roles become glass cases that limit your expression, shrink your frontier. As identity is inherited instead of discovered, you live inside their museum, never your life. Why is the world trapped in third world enslaving mindset, inherited nervous systems, and mind-invented museums? Because the world is still running on ancestor survival wiring, never sovereign awareness. Most people are never thinking, they're reacting from a nervous system shaped by centuries of fear, scarcity, and danger. I witness that. I can see that in life and I see it in the world. These inherited alarms create third world enslaving mindsets, smallness, obedience, and emotional poverty. The museum mind keeps replaying these ancient reflexes as if they're still relevant, because inherited beliefs feel like truth when they're really just memorized fear. People mistake generational conditioning for identity. They defend their limitations because they think they know, but yet they know is just hand-me-down programming. Every time you say no, that's hand-me-down programming. This is how the mind-invented museum forms old interpretations, get polished, protected, and worshipped as reality. Because the world keeps choosing familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom. Third world enslaving mindsets survive because they feel safe, predictable, and culturally approved. The nervous system clings to what it recognizes, even if it's painful. The warrior breaks the museum walls by sensing from awareness and hearkening the wisdom of awareness instead of reacting from inheritance. Why you are unknowingly trapped in ancestor programming, loop scripts, and mind-invented museums. Because your nervous system fires ancient alarms before your awareness even arrives. Your body reacts with reflexes shaped by centuries of survival, never by truth of the moment. Fear, hesitation, and people-pleasing, overthinking, these aren't your patterns, they're your ancestral echoes. Man, I got some good ancestral echoes I've had the privilege of rising out of. You feel trapped because your biology is replaying a script written long before you were born. Because your mind recycles inherited interpretation and calls them you. Thoughts, beliefs, and judgment and emotional reactions are mostly hand-me-down conclusions from parents, culture, and lineage. The mind doesn't create truth, it curates old interpretations like museum artifacts. You make these relics for identity, and that's how the loop stays alive. Because outdated scripts feel familiar, and the nervous system confuses familiarity with safety. The loop continues because the body prefers predictability, suffering over unpredictable freedom, and unborrowed awareness. I love that. Unborrowed awareness. How do you feel? Old roles, old reactions, old emotional patterns, they feel normal, so the system clings to them. The warrior breaks the museum walls by sensing from awareness instead of reacting from inheritance. While energized listening, maverick questions rise you into the liberator of you, modernizing your nervous system and mind-invented museum, because your energized listening now wires your nervous system from reaction to revelation. When you listen without ego, without memory, without inherited fear, your nervous system stops replaying ancestral alarms. Energized listening upgrades your biology from survival mode to sovereignty. You stop living from yesterday's reflexes and start sensing from today's awareness. Because maverick questions break the outdated loops your mind keeps worshiping. Maverick question doesn't seek an answer, it detonates a pattern. It exposes a museum exhibit your mind keeps polishing, old beliefs, old identities, and old interpretations to smithereens. One clean question can collapse a century of inherited programming and open a frontier your ancestors never imagined. Because becoming the liberator of you requires modernizing the inner architecture and the inner questionnaire of your maverick moxie, never decorating the old museum. You rise the moment you stop trying to fix the past and start upgrading the now, here and now nirvana within you, and stop replaying the past. Energized listening maverick questions turn your nervous system into a living instrument instead of an ancestral archive of yesterday. This is the way you modernize your mind, liberate your perception, and step out of every inherited cage. While I'm the liberator of me dissolves inherited nervous system traps and mind-invented museums. Because energetic liberation overrides the nervous system's ancestral alarms. When you rise as the liberator of you, you stop reacting from the nervous system your ancestors built for their survival. Energetic liberation modernizes your biology, shifting your inherited fear loops into sovereign presence. You stop replaying their alarms and instantly generate your own adventurous awareness and forthright frequencies of easy. Because political incorrect inspiration breaks the museum of cultural obedience. Politically incorrect inspiration is never rebellion. It's authenticity without permission. It shatters the mind-invented museum where you were taught to shrink, behave, and comply. This ignition frees you from you and inherited roles, outdated scripts, and the emotional cages your lineage normalized. Cowboy wisdom plus revolutionary revelations now write the inner acumen, never outer stories. Cowboy wisdom gives you the raw, sovereign, unborrowed clarity of liberation. Revolutionary revelations give you frontier-level perception, unleashing your cowboy perceptor to ride the range of revolutionary audacity, naturally galvanizing, enterprising wizardry. Together they dissolve the inherited nervous system, reflexes, and mind-made illusions that kept you trapped. As you stop living as a museum exhibit and start showcasing a modernized, sovereign-authored force of nature. And I am Robert Wilson with Cowboy Wisdom, but really, I really want people to understand you encompass the wisdom, insight, clarity, and the talent to live your desired lifestyle in a bold, bright way. And I want to thank you, and we'll